We basically have a very big virus of misconception within the legal system, because the legal system has its own vocabulary. So now the word smart means wisdom, but it doesn't. It means injury. It always did. And so when you become what you think wise in the world of man's imaginations and philosophies, you end up in the smart world, and you will injure yourself with that, because that is not truth. That is not what comes from God. That's what comes from the imaginations of men who have been affected and basically directed through evil, through Satan, and very powerful spirit creatures who are now surrounding the sandbox of what was once a pure place, which is the earth. Now we call it the world because it's now referred to in the hands of Satan. It's in something that's temporal, not going to exist for very long. It has its day coming when it will not be here, and God's judgment is coming upon all those who are going to have to decide, which side they're on. So the judgment's coming. Are you on God's side? Are you on Satan's side? Are you on fiction, or are you on truth? So when they come up with this concept of human rights, I always looked at that. I said, where did that whole concept start to come into real effect? And of course, when you start to see the League of Nations and the UN start getting their power, then they start producing these concepts of human rights. But are they really natural rights? Now, we did a video on natural rights versus legal rights, and natural rights, of course, are endowed upon or bestowed upon all God's creation because we're his property and he's unalienable. Therefore, us made in his image are unalienable. Now, when man goes into taking on a lie and following traitorous philosophies, he walks into Satan's world, which of course has now embraced and made the tag word legal come about, because lawyers operate in something that's opposite to free grace. So they're dealing with something artificial, and therefore they've created a debtor system. And they would do this because they do not advocate the will of God, they advocate the will of the devil, who has sent them to do this. And when we look at the definition, are human rights the same as natural rights? An article popped up just strictly a search on this. And I thought it was, at least to the point. And it said, in recognition of the 63rd anniversary of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, President Obama proclaimed this week Human Rights Week. Americans know a thing or two about rights, considering that the country was founded on the self-evident truth that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights. But when the president invokes human rights, is he talking about the same concepts from the Declaration of Independence? That is to say, are human rights the same as natural rights? At the time of the founding, people spoke of rights as being natural or God-given. Beginning in the 20th century, these were replaced by the thoroughly modern idea of human rights. Although both natural rights and human rights are universal, there are fundamental differences between the two. First of all, natural unalienable rights do not come from government. Governments only secure these rights. That is, they create the political conditions that allow one to exercise them. Human rights, on the other hand, are bestowed by the state. Notice what they just said there. Governments only secure these rights on the natural unalienable. That is, they create the political conditions that allow one to exercise them. Human rights, on the other hand, are bestowed by the state and have become a catch-all term for anything we desire and deem important. As a result, whereas natural rights such as life, liberty, and property are rights that government protects from infringement by others, human rights such as housing and leisure are often things that the government is obligated to provide. But the key thing that we don't want to lose track on here is that they've exposed the fact that the term human rights are associated with a government that is of a legal origin. So their position is basically granting the terminology of legal mixed in with human, because they're one and the same. Human is not mankind. It was used to basically take you away from a pure sense, because mankind was unalienable. It came from God. God made man in his image. So he did not make human in his image. And unfortunately, people have embraced this term human because many people would like to be politically correct, and they go, well, in the legal, we don't like to use the word mankind because that would actually seem very chauvinistic. And therefore, it would look like man is in charge and women are subservient. So they go down the direction that human is basically a bad, is a good thing, and mankind is a bad terminology. So, well, we have to look at things realistically. Until women stop using the term woman, that would be ridiculous, because in the Genesis account, a woman came from a man, and woman, the wording in English, comes from the Hebrew word womb man, a man with a womb. So because she came from the man in the creation account in Genesis, that's why we use the term woman or women. So why would they be using these words then? You can't play both sides. You can't just say, by the way, I don't like that, but I'm going to adopt this, but you better not use this, when the very terminology comes from man or mankind. So we were not made in the image of God as humans. When man sinned, the terminology for human, because we use phrases like, oh, I'm only human, which says you've made a mistake or you're imperfect. Well, that's leading into imperfection and an error or a flaw. Therefore, you have a blemish. You're not in the pure sense anymore, because now you're walking in error. Now, according to Scripture, Christ wiped out all the debt, even though we await the finalization of what comes with this good faith by accepting his Son. Then we're going to receive the incorruptible body. We're not going to be in corruption anymore, because we know man's body corrupts because of what the sin was. But the blessing and the promise is there in the faith of your God-given Christian name, which says you are now the property of God. You've accepted the promise. If you've accepted the legal surname as your title because you just want to do business and commerce in the mammon world of Satan, well, then you've chosen your side. And I can't spend all my time on these videos trying to find a way to tickle your ears so that I don't offend you on this moment. But this is the reality, and this is the truth, and the truth will set you free, and a legal fiction will not. Money doesn't grow on trees, so it's artificial. It's not a natural concept. And if you believe that you have to continue to stay in that, and you don't believe that there is an exemption to not be involved in that, you're sadly mistaken, because there's only two sides. But you cannot choose to be on both sides, that's bad faith, duplicity, and remain on the side of God. You cannot serve God and mammon. Cannot means impossible. So there's no possible way in truth could serve a fiction, because a fiction doesn't exist. So it's an impossible concept, and that's why none of this really works. It's just a fraud. It's a misconception of birth. It was not who you really were intended to be under the purpose of God, and now you're running under the purpose of Satan if you're operating in the legal. And this has to come to an end. And it will not end without you frustrating this contract.